Basically, what I wanted to chat with you guys today is about the idea of rest. I feel like I'm quite a broken record about it, but I think the reason why is because I'm firstly an introvert. I'm quite high on the extreme levels of introversion, and I also don't have a lot of energy. And recently, in the last few years, I just realized that I am also a highly sensitive person, someone who has highly sensitive traits. And you can go read up more about it. It's not that you get offended by other people easily or you cry when people say something and you're too sensitive. That's not what it really means. People who have highly sensitive traits are basically people who are a little bit more sensitive to the environment in a sense that they take in a lot more, they listen a lot more, they are very sensitive to lights, to visual changes, to bright lights, to smells, and even like sensitive to what other people are saying or what emotions they have. Something that people around me kind of always say is like, hey, you're very good intuitively, or you can pick up on what other people are feeling very easily. And it's not because I can read people's minds, but I just pick up all these signals that are telling me all this information. So basically, with my introversion and with this highly sensitive trait, I get overwhelmed or I get tired a lot faster. So I don't really have that huge energy or emotional capacity to constantly be engaged. And so then I'm always very interested in this idea of resting because I always feel very overwhelmed. And recently I was rather overwhelmed and I thought that, in order to not be so tired, I just had to sleep and I just had to force myself to sleep early. But then I had problems with trying to sleep early because my brain was just so overly tired that I couldn't fall asleep. When people around me started having kids, I also noticed this phenomenon with kids that when they are overtired or they reach a stage where they are so tired, they actually have trouble falling asleep and they can't regulate their emotions as well, and then they have trouble putting themselves to sleep. So I was just like listening to TED Talks and kind of like searching for helpful videos on YouTube and reading up, which is what I do usually when I face like something that I'm struggling with. And I chanced upon this video from one of the TED Talks, and it talked about the 7 different types of rest. I've always suspected about this, so I will always like whenever I get too tired from having too much social engagements, I always tell my family, hey, my social energy is depleted. I really need a break. But I didn't realize that okay, there are actually 7 different types, 7 different ways that you can kind of be overwhelmed or get tired. And this video really broke it down very succinctly, and I thought I wanted to share it with you. So the 7 different types of rest, they're basically physical. This one we know, like, if you exercise, you have to rest. All sports people, athletes know that you can't keep pushing your body, otherwise you will get a lot of injuries. So rest is obviously a huge part of the process. Whereas like most of the time in our modern society, we always think about rest as something that we do after we finish our work. But actually, we should think about rest as part of the process of work so that we can do meaningful and good work. The second type of rest or second way you can get tired or overwhelmed is obviously mental, when you're using your brain to solve issues, to problem solve, to make decisions. These all fall under mental rest or mental fatigue. And then the third one is emotional fatigue. So this one is rather interesting. Yes, sometimes you can get very emotionally drained when you have to deal with a lot of things that involve your emotion, or your emotion is trying to tell you something, or you have to deal with relationships, and it taxes more on your emotions. So in the video they explain that emotional fatigue can also come from not being your authentic self. So for example, if you're constantly in a situation where you feel like you have to tweak the way you behave in a certain way, or you have to tweak the way you think or your true authentic thoughts, you have to kind of like be careful of what you're saying and not saying. This disjoint between like who you are in your real environment and who you are when you are alone can cause that emotional fatigue. And of course, we all want to learn to be respectful of others and not to say things that are not edifying or saying things in the wrong manner. And I think that communication or communication skills is definitely something that a lot of us need to work on, but it's also finding that balance between picking up good communication skills. How do you disagree with people in a way that is non-divisive? And how do you still voice your opinion or voice your preferences or stay true to your thoughts, even though the people around you have a very different view or a very different approach to life? And that is a very tricky thing that I feel it does set up your energy trying to navigate all these different relationships that we have and how best to communicate with one another. Sorry, the fourth one is sensory rest. And this is basically just resting from being overly stimulated. So maybe you're constantly being bombarded by information, you use your social media, so we have social media fatigue because you don't allow yourself to have a downtime, you don't allow yourself to be bored, always looking at the screen, or you are always listening to somebody talk non-stop. And sometimes I think that when I have a problem with boredom or when I'm trying to do too many things at one time, that is when my sensory fatigue really sets in. Like if let's say I'm doing some kind of work that doesn't require my brain, I tend to want to fill it up or engage my brain with like a podcast or a video or something happening or listening to an audiobook in the background. But then I realized that sometimes it's just good to give my mind a break. And if I'm constantly doing that like for the whole day, my brain does get very exhausted from trying to juggle two tasks at the same time. The fifth one is social rest, and I think this one I'm quite familiar with because I'm an introvert. So my social energy and my social tank tends to run out pretty quickly. Every week I meet both sides of my family, and so to be honest, like that already drains me out. So I don't really have that much energy to go and meet other people, and especially if I have to go to work, I also have to meet my colleagues, I have to interact with the people that I work with. So social energy is that kind of interaction where you have to engage with other people. Then we have sixth one, which is creative rest, which is very interesting because a lot of people think that you can be creative just, oh, this person's very creative. I mean, like, I face that as a creative, as someone who comes up with a lot of ideas. People like to come to me and just ask me like, hey, can you come up with good ideas on the spot? It's a bit like a comedian or a stand-up comedian, and people come up to you and ask you to tell a joke on the spot, when actually, your ideas and your jokes, it needs time to be formed, it needs inspiration, it needs time to be worked on, and all these things cannot happen if you don't give yourself that creative space to rest or to be inspired or to just enjoy consuming other people's creative output. So the final type of rest that was mentioned in this TED Talk is spiritual rest, which they define as the ability to connect beyond the physical and mental and feel a sense of belonging, love, acceptance, and purpose. So there are these 7 different types of rest, and each type of rest has a different way you recharge. And I think like being able to identify why you are tired or the reason or the type of fatigue that you have really helps you to kind of have the counter action that you need to rest, right? And of course, sometimes it's a combination of a few different types of overwhelm or a few different types of fatigue, and that's why we might have a little bit of trouble kind of differentiating them. But I think this really helped me, and so I hope that like by sharing it with you, it would be helpful for you too to be able to identify what is possibly causing you to be fatigued or to be overwhelmed or to be tired. Yeah, so you can go and check out the video. I will link it down in the description below, and you can also read the article version of that TED Talk video. And I hope this helps you on your journey to have a more sustainable and meaningful life. To the next video. Bye.